Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be doing another how to play video. This one is going to be for Hearthstone, and this is going to be the very basics of the game, and this video will be aimed at new players. But if you're not a new player, you're welcome to stay. So, it's going to be focusing on things like basic deck building. So, I'm not going to go too in depth on the whole deck building, because I'm going to do a video later on that. For the basics, I'm going to not include the Grand Tournament Goblins vs Gnomes Classic as well, and all those kind of things, because all the expansions now, there's 3, so cards that players are going to obtain are going to be different. So I can't pick, say, a bunch of classic cards, because there will be some players that have only been able to open Goblins vs Gnomes and they won't have any classic, and the same for if I was to do that. So I find it easier just to stick with basic. So in the basic deck building, you're going to need removal, and this is mainly spells. So you need spells for board control, and board control is being in control of the board, so you can use spells to remove enemy creatures without using your creatures, so you have more on the board than the opponent. That's basically board control, but I'll explain that more later. So we're going to want Frostbolt. This is 2 mana and it's really early damage, and you also get to freeze creatures, so you can use it later on in the game against a big creature if you want to freeze it and hold it back. So Mirror Image, we're not really going to want to use because it's sort of stalls the game early on. Arcane Missiles is too unreliable unless you build a deck around it. Arcane Explosion, it's not really used very often because not many people use 1 health creatures. So we use Arcane Intellect, 3 mana, draw 2 cards. That's really good because you're going to need card advantage, and I'll explain what that is later. Frost Nova we don't really use because, again, you need to sort of build a deck around that. Fireball, sort of average mana cost, and it's good high damage, so that's good for removing big creatures. And Polymorph, similar sort of thing with removing big creatures. It turns them into a 1/1 sheep, so you've still got an enemy to deal with on the board, but if you were to, say, use this on a 6/7 creature, it would take it down to a 1/1, and then you could just use your hero power ping on it. So that works. And for the Flame Strike, it's deal 4 damage to all enemy minions. So this is good for lots of little minions on the board. So the reason I've put 2 of each card in is because you will have more of a chance of drawing them, and more of a chance of getting them in the situations you need. So say you're early on with Frostbolt, but you didn't get a Frostbolt in your hand, you've got more of a chance of drawing one if you have 2 in your deck. Alright, so that's it for the spells, because most of the others aren't really useful in this sort of deck build. For the creatures, the Mage specifically only has 1. Even though it is a good creature, you're going to need to try and get more. So that means the neutral cards, you're going to need a lot more from that. So if we put Water Elementals in, these freeze enemies, so they're really good, and can also slow down creatures sort of through the game. So if we move on to neutral, we're going to need, if you hover over your character picture, you'll be able to see the curve, and the curve is how many mana, well, how many cards that cost a certain amount of mana you have. So if you see, I have 2 Frostbolts, so it said 2 cards in the 2 slot. But I have a lot of cards in the 4 slot at the moment, so I'm not going to need many more of those. Even though your curve at the end sort of wants to look like a mountain, so it's low at the sort of 1/7 end, but then creeps up to around the 4 being the highest. So 1 costs. There isn't really many good ones. You see here Murlocs, Goldshire Footman, that's not good at all. Healing is generally good, but it's not great. And Stone Tusk Boar, dealing 1 damage is good, but when you're able to do it, deal 1 damage and get a creature on the board, that's even better. So we'll keep those 2. For the 2-drops, we have, on this page at least, we have Acidic Swamp Ooze and Bloodfoam Raptor. Exactly the same stats, but the only difference between them is Acidic Swamp Ooze has a battle cry to destroy your opponent's weapon. So it's better in every way, unless you're building a deck around a beast, which we're not. So we'll go with the Acidic Swamp Ooze. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. We'll go into neutral. And most of these cards are pretty basic. Nothing really good here, apart from Novice Engineer. And this is more card draw. So we'll put only 1 of these in, and the only reason is because 2 of them means you're not going to get like a big creature on the board for a low cost. And it basically cycles through your card. So if you were to play this, it would draw you another card, but also leave a 1/1 creature on the board. But having 2 of them in your deck sort of uses too much of that. So you're going to get 1/1s but cycling your deck. So I only decided to put 1 of these in. If we look at 3-drops, a mistake that most people make is Magma Rager. They're like, oh yeah, we definitely need this card. It's 5/1. It's going to get high damage, and we're going to be able to kill the opponent really quickly. Well, there's 2 problems there. Killing the opponent really quickly might be the final thing you have to do, but it's getting there that's the problem. And getting there with a 5/1 creature doesn't really work, because there's 3 hero powers that can kill it off, but then there's also lots of low-cost creatures. So if you played a Magma Rager, and say, just for this, somebody played in Elven Archer, that would be a really big problem, because they'd just kill it with a 1/1 creature. And it wouldn't even be the 1/1 creature, it would be the Battle Cry. So for a 3-cost, a Magma Rager is not very good at all. So the cards we are going to want for 3-cost are going to be things like the Razor Fan. And this is good because it summons 2 different creatures on the board, and you also get a 1/1 boar that can trade off with other creatures that are played. And that helps with board advantage. So we'll get more of them. We will get 2 Shattered Sun Clerics. These are good because they increase the health and attack of 1 friendly minion. So the trades that you make with the creatures that you play this on are going to be more in your favor. So, I think that's it for 3-cost, because on the mana curve it's almost at 4, so we'll go to 4 costs. And for this, we are going to get 2 Sen'jin Shieldmasters. This is for Taunt, and Taunt, if you've played the tutorial, which I'm expecting people to have when I'm making this, it basically stops you from attacking anything else, and you have to attack this. So that's pretty basic if you've played the tutorial. So now you see the curve starting to work. It goes from 1 and raises up to 4. So we're going to now move on to the 5-drops. Gurubashi. We're going to put 2 of these in. It's especially good for the mage deck, because mage can deal 1 damage to anything. So whenever this minion takes damage, gain +3 attack. Most people would play the game by like pinging the opponent's things, but you have to realize there's also good combos you can do. So then Elven Archer on this would work as well. Say you needed 7 damage to win the game, but you had a Gurubashi Berserker on the board, and the only card you had in hand was an Elven Archer. You could just use an Elven Archer on this, and then ping it, and then you get lethal. But most people don't notice stuff like that, and it's quite good. We're going to put 1 Stormpike Commando in for its deal 2 damage. That's good for removal. And for the late game, which is up here, we need some 6-drops. We're going to put in 2 Boulder Fist Ogres, because they're quite heavy late game characters. And 2 Stormwind Champions. And this is because this buffs all the other creatures. Now, if you look at the curve, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, my 5, 6, and 7 are all jumbled up, but it doesn't matter too much as long as you have got less 5, 6, and 7 creatures than your 4s and 3s. Alright, so that's it for the building of this deck. So now to explain from a new player's sort of standpoint, I'm going to go into practice mode because I don't really want to match up against a really good player when I go and play this deck. Because Hearthstone scales to like how new you are. It matches you up against new players because you need better cards to be able to win more games. But you're also going to need a deck that can win games in the first place, which is sort of what I'm aiming at with this. So we're going to go against Warrior. This is because if I draw the Acidic Swampooze, I'm able to show you what it does. Because there's a lot of classes that have weapons, but the Warrior is the most likely to play them.
Jaina versus Garrosh.
Victory or death!
You asked for it.
So the first thing I'm going to explain is mulligans. Now mulligans are, if you don't know, is you get your starting hand and you can pick cards to go back into your deck and you draw more. So the cards you generally want to discard are, well, it depends if you're going first or second. If you're going first, you don't really want any cards over 3 mana. If you're going second, you can sort of get away with 1, but it's best if you stick to nothing over 3 mana. Unless you're doing combos later on, but that doesn't really apply here. So Polymorph, that's not good to keep. Novice Engineer, as I explained earlier, this is something you'll play and you cycle through a new card. So that isn't overly good to keep either. A 3-cost would be pretty good to keep here, but it's draw 2 cards. Yes, that draws more cards, but it also takes up my turn. But here, I'm going to keep it because it's a card I'll play on turn 3 if I need more cards later on. So let's stick with that. You need to hope for low creatures to play. So Stormwind Champion is really bad in your starting hand. You can't play it until you get 7 mana.
Job's done.
Right, so I can't do anything on my first turn. I can play Acidic Swampooze, but that means I need to hope that the opponent plays a weapon, which they don't. Even though you can play this without the Battlecry doing anything, it's better if it does. Now the reason I played that instead of keeping it in my hand is a thing called Tempo. Tempo is playing a card on the mana. So you see here I have 3 mana. I could play Arcane Intellect, draw more cards. Both Arcane Intellect and Razorfen Hunter will get me Tempo. I could Fire Blast Face, and that would not be very good tempo because, first of all, I'm not using enough mana. Well, using all the mana I get on the turn. And I can also play creatures or draw cards. So here, I'm going to play the Razorfen Hunter and attack face. Now, the reason I played that is a thing called board control. Board control is about having more creatures on the board. And also being in control of the board. So if your opponent play creatures, you'd want to make trades with them. So here, I have a few choices. I could stick with the Tempo and Polymorph. But generally you want to use Polymorph on a big creature. So that's not a very good idea here. I could ping the creature and then attack with the 1/1. But again, that's not very good for Tempo because I'm going to need to play a card which is closer to it, which is like this 3. I could also attack with the 3/2, but that would be a bad idea because this has more attack, and if I attack with the 2/3, this doesn't die. So I'm going to want to Arcane Intellect here to draw more cards. A mistake which I made, which I've only just realised, is most of the time you want to draw the cards first because you could draw another card which helps. So see, if I used Arcane Intellect and I got a Elven Archer, I could have played the Elven Archer on the 2/2, made it a 2/1 and then attacked with the 1/1, and that would have been a better trade. But most of the time, it doesn't matter over that much. So the trades I'm going to want to focus on here are, it depends on the class you're playing against. If I was to attack the 3/2 into the 2/3, that would mean I have one big creature on the board, which a class would be able to use sort of removal, similar to Polymorph on that creature. But it wouldn't use it on this because it's too much of a small creature. But if I was to attack 3/2 into it, I would have a 2/1 and a 1/1 left. And that means that any sort of card like Flame Strike would be able to deal with it. So I'm going to attack the 1/1 and the 2/1 into it. And then I'm going to play Ascension Shieldmaster. Here I could have played the Razorfen Hunter and pinged instead of using up the boar. That gets good tempo. But I sort of want more board control with creatures on there. That would have worked with a Razorfen Hunter. But having a bigger creature on the board when your opponent doesn't have anything is also a good idea. Because they'll end up using a lot of cards to try and remove it. So here, I could use a Fireball on the creature, but that would be too much damage. So I could use a Shattered Sun Cleric on this to increase it. And then I have 3 mana left over to play this. Increasing this basically means that if I was to make the trade with this, it wouldn't die. But the thing is, then I would have 3 creatures on the board with 1 health. And I also have another creature on the board that has the right amount of attack and health to take out a 3 health creature. Because this has 3 attack, but it only has 1 health. So it was most likely going to die next turn. And then you would use the 4/3 creature to attack the face. Then I have 2 3 health creatures. And it isn't going to die as easy to board clears. It's also cards that have charge will be able to take out other creatures pretty easily. So here, I have a really good play of a Stormwind Champion. A card like this, you're not going to want to play on an empty board, because the idea is it buffs the other creatures on the board by giving them all 1/1. You can also use this later on in the game, if the opponent has creatures on the board, to make good trades against them.
Just me and Mr. Bitey.
We're going to imagine here for a second, I didn't have these 3 creatures on the board. Like, now, I have 6 damage to face, but I also have a 6 damage Fireball. Now here is the time where it's okay to use these kind of spells on face, because you're going to be able to kill the opponent. And that is about it for the sort of basics I have to explain. Card advantage is about having more cards in your hand. So we'll have one last look through the card collection. Cards that draw you cards give you card advantage. So cards like the Novice Engineer. If you played it, you would have a creature, but you would also draw another creature, meaning you would have the same amount of cards as well as a creature. The idea of card advantage is to keep getting cards, because in a game, if you were to get to a point where you only had like 2 cards, you wouldn't really have anything to play, and at that point the opponent could just keep playing and playing creatures that you wouldn't be able to deal with. So you're going to need cards that draw cards in your deck, like Arcane Intellect and Novice Engineer. So I'm going to show you one last thing. This is Nightblade and Stormpike Commando. They're both 5-cost creatures. One of them is a 4/4 and one of them is a 4/2. Now you're probably thinking as a new player, but wait, one of them is a 4/4 deals 3 damage, one of them is a 4/2 deals 2 damage. It's kind of obvious which one's better. But the case is no, not really, because a Nightblade, it deals 3 damage to the enemy hero. Now that isn't a very good battle cry, because this deals damage to the hero, and 3 damage to the hero doesn't usually mean anything. It will only matter if you're going to be able to kill them, like when I use the fireball. But 3 damage to the hero is sort of just a waste, so it's a 5 mana 4/4 creature, which isn't really good. Then you have the Stormpike Commando, 5 mana 4/2, deal 2 damage, but this means for board control, you can deal 2 damage to a creature. So say the opponent had like Acidic Swamp Ooze, and then you played the Stormpike Commando, you could remove the Acidic Swamp Ooze and get the body. But if you played a Nightblade, you wouldn't be able to remove the Acidic Swamp Ooze, meaning that Acidic Swamp Ooze will be able to trade with the Nightblade and something else. So that's about it that I have for the basics. If you would like me to do more of these, I will. Just let me know in the comments below. I've got ideas for ones to explain how to build good decks, like I usually do with my fun decks. Not saying they're good, but at least they're fun. And I'll show you the strategy that I use for building them. I've also got other ideas, like how to play Arena and that. So just let me know in the comments below. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Thanks in advance, and I'll speak to you all next time.